Anyway, today we're talking about so much good. Excuse me. And I thought of that because we've been having a lot of fun lately. How many people have been to, hosted, or participated in a Gourmets for God feast in the past 4 or 5 weeks? Yeah, see all those smiling faces? We're not going to get weighed because we probably gained a little weight having all this fun. But gee whiz. Fun, huh? Delicious. Made some really great friends. Tried things we've never eaten before. Cooked at the table. Oh my goodness. Just wonderful. So, thanks to those of you who are participating, and we have a few who just came back from one last night, right? 3 of you were there? Excellent. How was that? Fabulous. Yeah. All right. So we have a lot of things to be grateful for. I was planning on acknowledging some of our students, and a few of them are away today, so we're going to postpone that. But we're always doing fun things that are transformative here. And so the idea that we would just focus on this so much good is what gave rise to this whole theme this morning. Then I thought, okay, well, if you take that little phrase, it's hardly even that, so much good. So much is easy to understand. So much. What is so much? So much probably indicates that it's more than you could count in a single sitting. It might be more than you could contain in the containers that you have available. You might refer to it as a lot. You might have to make some sort of adjustment to accommodate this volume, so much. And possibly, even if you could count it or measure it or contain it, by the time you got done with that act, more of whatever it is, good, will have shown up and you'll have to start over again. So even with this little phrase, so much, we begin to glimpse the infinite. We begin to tap into this idea that no matter what we call it, or what container we get out, or how good we or efficient we might be at counting, that there's always more. There's always more. So there's that part. But what about this concept of good? What is good? Is good a delineation? Is it a qualification? Is it some sort of a parameter that has all of these, watermarks and qualifiers to it, and conditions to it? And then, of course, it would have its opposite, which is over here we have what we call bad. And if so, wouldn't there need to be some sort of a system to identify the goods and the bads? And put the goods over here and the bads over there? Might there not need to be perhaps a wall, a great wall, fence, or some kind of a barrier? Would there need to be personnel, staff involved in all of this selecting, in all of this implementation, in all of this maintenance to keep the goods and the bads separate from one another? Might there be a little bit of competition to move from the bad zone to the good zone and not get identified as a fraud and sent back to the other one? Interestingly enough, it sounds a lot like life on this planet for a lot of people right now, and actually for a long time. It also sounds a lot like the stories that we see played out in science fiction and fantasy and fairy tales, especially the grim ones. This idea that good and evil are constantly duking it out, and there are good people and bad people, and if we can just get them sorted and staying that way, everything will be fine and dandy. But of course, that doesn't work. It's not the truth. Strange, though, how so much of our culture and our activity and our efforts to, wage peace, to establish peace again in the land, is based on this kind of thinking. This kind of thinking is what we call separation thinking. It's based on an idea that we got a long time ago and were encouraged to hang on to and believe in. That Eden, right, the garden, heaven, good with a capital G, our Creator, whatever name we might choose to use to identify that, and one another, that we're all separate. We're out here on our own, it's all one big mistake. And you better watch out, because there are two powers in this universe, one's good and one's evil. And if you're not careful, the evil one will seduce you, or bite you in the butt, or convince you to come over here, and so on and so on and so on. It's really quite amazing that we've fallen for that myth and believed in it so strongly that we have taken up arms, that we have built those walls, that we have labeled one another and put some here and some there. It never works. You know, those neighborhoods keep changing. Oh, well, it used to be so whatever, and then something happened, you know. Now, I live in a place, a development that has one of those gates on it. And so I say this knowing that I'm really kind of insulting myself in the process, but I've always thought that the term gated community was an oxymoron, you know. Because that gate says you may come in and you may not. You know, if you got the secret code, you may come in, but if you don't, you must stay out. So we have this whole life built on all of these fears about what's not good, getting into what is good, taking away what is good, which we believe is limited, and so many more things. That even though we dwell in this universe, in this land, in this world, and in this life of so much good, most of us are only experiencing a tiny little speck, a manageable amount, which we may have struggled to believe in, surrounded by all these ideas of limitation. So how on earth, because that's where we are, would we get over this pattern? How would we move beyond it so that we can experience more of this so much good? Because so many of us have been listening to and reading Deepak Chopra's books and so many others. We get that there's more. It's kind of like a purgatory. It's kind of like this place where now you know there's more and you're still living a life of limitation. And it's like, you know, I guess I'm going to have to shift my thinking to accommodate this new awareness. Otherwise, I'm just going to be more frustrated than I ever was. Now that I know what I'm missing out on. You know, they say ignorance is bliss. I remember when I was a little girl, I wished for that. I wished for that. I'd see people next door and think, yeah, lucky them, they don't know. Point my finger. Speaking of pointing our fingers, so when we get to this point where we realize, well, there are those people who are responsible for this mess, because they told us we were separate. They convinced us to separate one group from another, to believe in two powers, and to put some people here and some people there. They're the problem. What we need to do is gather all of them up and put them somewhere, and then we'll be fine. Well, gee, that wouldn't work, would it? That's the same thing. Einstein said that a problem cannot be solved at the same level at which it was created. So that's not going to work. What do we do then? Well, of course, we talk a lot about beliefs around here. Now, what we're saying is that we're steeped in a culture, we've been brought up in one through several generations, millennia, okay, of believing in this idea of separation from good, capital G, good, and that there's this other thing. We were watching some terrible, rerunish kind of movie the other day, and it was about angels, but they'd all fallen and they were, but still had to see how it ended, So we've really gotten steeped in this idea that there are two powers. And what happens is that our thinking, especially when we're not watching it, goes along with that. Our feelings follow our thoughts. So guess what? Every time we don't watch our thinking, our feelings go along for the ride. Then what happens? Creative process kicks in. Then things start to cook, start to take shape, start to call everything around them to take shape according to that pattern that we created with that unconscious thought we let go by and the feeling that followed it because they're like this, Pretty soon we've got something showing up that looks like proof that the world really is like this. So the thing is, of course, that we get to and we have to interrupt that thinking process that says good is gone, or it never existed in the first place, or it's way out there away from where I am. We have to interrupt these thoughts that say there are two forces, two powers duking it out. You better watch out. We have to interrupt these thoughts that say that there are good people and bad people, and good places and bad places. You know why? Not just because it's not good for us to think that way, but because we are all connected. There was a lot of truth in that song. I believe that Jan Garrett wrote those lyrics in practitioner training when she was at Agape. So, we're all connected. We're all thinking. Our feelings follow our thoughts. The two of them together just start making stuff happen, because that's how it works. So how we break this cycle is that we change our thoughts. And how we reverse this global trend is to all do it. And we can't do it for one another. That doesn't work. I can't change your thoughts, and you can't change mine. However, we can inspire one another to remember. There are beautiful tracks and treasures left by monks and mystics, by seers, by artists and scientists, and there are some that are thousands of years old being rediscovered, retranslated, understood in new ways. They were encoded and encrypted, not only for their preservation so they wouldn't be recognized and could continue to exist, but also so that as we evolved, we would recognize something that we didn't see in them before. That's how truth is. It has layers and layers and layers that keep revealing itself to us as we look at it again and again and again. So as we evolve, when we crack open that sacred text or that book of truth, what happens is we see stuff that we swear wasn't there before. Because it wasn't in us. It wasn't awakened in us yet. So this is really a neat thing. We can take advantage of this fact that we're all connected. And when one of us speaks the truth, or sings the truth, or draws or paints the truth, or sculpts the truth, or contains it in poetry or a dance or what have you, there's something within us that recognizes that. Something that's been there all along, nearer than our breathing, closer than hands and feet. In the Talmud it says nearer than your neck vein. There's something within us that recognizes that and awakens to it. And the beauty of it is that there are a myriad of forms. So there's something for everyone to recognize. There are paths and ways for everyone to awaken. For some it might be art. Some it might be music. Some it might be sacred poetry. Some it might be deep study. Some of it might be deep spiritual practice where you go away and you get really still and quiet. Some it might be silence. And some it might be some sort of activity that awakens that knowing. But that's the neat thing about truth, about capital T truth. It is universal. It's everywhere. It can't be stopped. And it is encoded and encrypted in everything. Greg Braden did a study with about 12 other scientists for a number of years and discovered that there's what's called the God code. It's this little code in the DNA of everything across all life, all plant, animal, mineral, everything. And the words translate to God eternal within the body. Kind of neat. I don't need to understand how they got there. I read the book, promptly forgot, but I love that. So it's in every one of us. It's in a lot of New Thought music. That's one way to trigger that awareness. And we can break the habit and access so much good by watching what we think. You know, some of us have to go to another group called Codependence Anonymous, right, to learn how to think and speak and choose differently than the person sitting next to us. Because we've been at this a long time. And culturally, it's not acceptable to have a different opinion. It didn't used to be. But now it's popular to be authentic. Isn't that wonderful? It's popular to be authentic. So instead of saying, oh, you SOB, oh, you're so authentic. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your candor. Thank you for being so real with me. See, we're starting to popularize this idea of being true, of being real. So, of course, thinking about the distance or the non-existence or the absence of good, of God, Creator, the absolute, the all that is. Thinking about our separation from all of that and one another is not going to solve the problem, because that is the level at which it was created. Here's the trick. We actually have to think about something we can't see. And at least one, if not several, master teachers have suggested that over the millennia. Think about what we cannot yet see. Until our feeling follows it, because that's what feeling does. And we begin to have this expectancy that just around the corner, just over the horizon, just in that next moment, this thing that we feel in our guts and our hearts is possible shows up. It's not hocus pocus. It's not some kind of magic trickery. What it is that all of that divine potential, all that infinite potential in the wave state becomes particularized when we think about it in a certain way. Isn't it wonderful that we know that now? What it is that by our choosing to focus our thought, our feeling follows, the creative process rolls out, we bring into our experience something which has been hidden. And it's only been hidden because we haven't been looking at it. We haven't been looking for it. We haven't been thinking about it lately. There's this wonderful thing I love to share every once in a while, which is that desire announces possibility. Desire is not one of those scenarios where you say, oh no, here I go wanting something again, and I know how that turns out, so, you know. Desire announces that the circumstances are ripe for the fulfillment of something. Different idea, isn't it? So how do we access so much good? How do we shift our own lives so that we're not in this sort of hell or purgatory of realizing there's infinite possibility and here I am over here living my teeny tiny life? We shift our thinking. We are truly transformed by the renewal of our minds. And how do we do it together? How do we do it for others? Not by force, not by longing, not by pining, not by blaming, not by identifying all the bad ones and putting them over here and then everything will be fine. We can't fight for peace. We can't wage war for freedom. We can't defend truth. It doesn't need our defense. None of that will work. But what will work is to be courageous enough, maybe like the emperor who thinks he or she has new clothes, to step out there and say, I know love is here. I know good is all around. I know peace is present. I know we're connected. I know we're in this together. I know we care for one another. I know that the world is going to heaven rather than hell, and something much more magnificent than a handbasket. What if? I mean, gee, okay, so now you know you have the license to be authentic. You have permission to be candid. You'll discover that maybe people initially get uncomfortable, but then they admire you for breaking the rules, for forging the way, for making it okay to have a new idea. Because what happens when we recognize capital T truth, capital G good, capital R reality, whatever you want to call it, you get this feeling. We all know what that's like. It's recognition. Instant peace. Instant fullness, wholeness, calm. We know we're in the right place. And when you sit next to someone who may think they have another idea, and in some way you express the truth, in a way that they can hear it, or see it, or taste it, or touch it, or whatever, that awakens within that person. Just like the tuning fork, when it is struck next to another of the same note, I said next to, the other one begins to sing. It hasn't been touched physically, but it's been touched vibrationally by your speaking the truth. So why not dare to be one of those crazy, oh yeah, eccentric, you know, that used to be an insult, now it's like a compliment. Be eccentric, be authentic, you know. Oh gosh, she always just says exactly what's on her mind. He always says what he's really feeling. Be that person. And make it your mission to go out there in lovely ways that are not combative and not judgmental, to speak the truth, to embody the truth, to recognize good and praise it, to give thanks, to be that person around whom others feel comfortable, even if they seem agitated and hard to get along by everyone else. Be that person that allows another to be comfortable. That's how we get to so much good. It's already here. It's already here. So just take the bow off. Undo that bow. Take the lid off that package and reach in. You're doing it for yourself, and you're doing it for all of those who don't realize they're sitting there waiting for someone else to go first. And it just might be it. Thank you.